They gave me 48 hours to prepare the apology. Not the usual diplomatic courtesies around that word. No softening, no mutual statement of regret, no joint acknowledgement of harm on both sides. An apology, singular, human, read aloud on the floor of the Vethrani Joint Treaty Commission's plenary session, entered into the permanent record by the Commission's own session archivist, and transmitted in full to all 43 member delegations by close of session. Those were the terms. The Commission's presiding arbiter, a gray-robed figure named Sorath Veth, had delivered them personally, which was itself a kind of theater. The Commission's presiding officer did not normally descend to the floor for administrative matters. The descent was meant to signal something. I understood what it was meant to signal. The incident they wanted the apology for had happened 3 years earlier, in the outer Varath Transit Corridor, a belt of navigable space the Commission had long claimed exclusive regulatory standing over, through which our survey vessels had been transiting for 11 years without incident. One of our instruments had logged a course deviation that, under the Commission's reading of its own jurisdiction charter, constituted an unauthorized adjustment in a regulated zone. The Commission's Compliance Division had flagged it. The Compliance Division's finding had been referred upward. The referral had climbed, slowly, as referrals in bodies like this always do, until it reached the level of presiding office, and became, somehow, a matter requiring a formal human apology on the floor of the plenary session. I had read the incident report carefully. The deviation was 11 degrees over 40 seconds of transit arc, the kind of adjustment a navigation system makes automatically to account for debris drift. I had also read something else, but I came to that in my own time. The chamber the Commission used for plenary sessions was an old one, older than the Commission itself, which had been constituted 41 years ago from the administrative remnants of 3 prior treaty bodies. The floor was pale stone, worn smooth by generations of delegations. The ceiling vaulted upward into a shallow dome of opaque gray composite, and the tiered seating that curved around 3 sides of the floor held the 43 member delegations in their assigned positions, ranked by seniority of accession. The human seat was near the back of the left tier. We had joined the Commission 22 years ago, when it still went by a different name. The seat had not moved since. Presiding Arbiter Veth opened the session with the standard recitation of standing matters, which took 11 minutes. I sat through it. My assistant, a young man named Cale Oren, who had been with the mission for 2 years, and who had spent the previous day preparing himself not to react to anything I might do, sat beside me, with his hands flat on the table. He was doing well. When the standing matters concluded, Veth called the human delegation forward. I stood. Cale stood. We walked to the floor. Veth read the incident finding into the record. He read the Compliance Division's determination. He read the Commission's formal request for a human statement of acknowledgement and regret, to be entered into the permanent record and transmitted to all member delegations by close of session. He set the document down and looked at me. The chamber was quiet in the way that chambers get when they have already decided what is about to happen. I reached into the case I had carried to the floor and placed a document on the table between us. For the record, I said, I won't be providing the apology. Veth's eyes moved to the document. The Commission's jurisdiction over the outer Varath Transit Corridor, I said, derives from the founding charter ratified at this body's constituting session 41 years ago. Article 7, Section 3. The navigational compliance framework the incident finding relies on sits inside that jurisdiction. Without it, there is no finding. I waited. The chamber did not move. At that same founding session, I said, the Commission's first presiding arbiter, a figure named Davin Orell, raised a point of order in the 3rd hour. He argued that the jurisdiction language in Article 7, Section 3, had been drafted against a star chart notation that had been superseded by a corrected survey filed 18 months prior, that the notation error placed the outer Varath corridor outside the correct boundary coordinates. He formally retracted the Commission's jurisdiction claim over that corridor on the record. The session archivist logged it. The Commission's founding session minutes, which are the Commission's own document, reflect the retraction on page 47. I tapped the document on the table. That is page 47. Veth picked it up. He did not speak. I had found it 6 weeks earlier, working through the Commission's own founding archive on a separate matter entirely. The retraction was not hidden. It had never been classified. It sat in the founding session minutes, logged and time-stamped, on page 47 of a document that ran to 212 pages. No one, in 41 years, appeared to have read that far. The compliance framework that governed the transit corridor had been built on a jurisdiction that the Commission's own founding session had walked back, before the body even convened its first full term. The 11 years of human transit through the corridor, the 3 years of incident review, the finding, the referral, the 48 hours I had been given to prepare an apology, all of it rested on a floor that had been pulled out from under it 41 years ago, on page 47, by the Commission's own first presiding officer. I waited while Veth read. He read for a long time. Around him, the chamber shifted, the particular, careful shift of a body that has not yet moved, but is beginning to understand that it will need to. I watched the row of senior delegates on the right tier lean, one by one, toward their own case files. I watched the Commission's chief legal counsel, a compact figure in the front row who had been still since the session opened, pick up a stylus and write something he then crossed out. Cale, beside me, did not move. He was still doing well. When Veth looked up, he did not look at me immediately. He looked at the document. "The founding session minutes," he said, "are part of the Commission's permanent archive." "Yes," I said. "This document, if authenticated, would be entered into the Commission's permanent record." "Yes," I said, "it would." There was a silence. The Commission's authentication protocol required the session archivist to verify any document sourced from the Commission's own archive. The session archivist was a senior official named Essen Varl, who had held the post for 19 years, and who, I was reasonably certain, had also never read page 47 of the founding session minutes. Varl was called to the floor. The authentication took 22 minutes. Varl confirmed the document. The founding session minutes were pulled from the archive in full. The relevant passage, Arbiter Oral's point of order, the formal retraction, the archivist's log entry, was read into the current session's permanent record by Varl himself, in the flat, careful voice of a person who understands that the words coming out of his mouth are going to create a great deal of work for a great many people. I listened to every word. When Varl finished, the chamber held its silence for a moment that stretched longer than chambers usually allow. "The session will recess," Veth said. He said nothing else. He did not look at me again as he gathered his materials. The 43 delegations began their own quiet conversations, the kind that are careful not to carry across the floor. The Commission's legal counsel had stopped writing entirely and was staring at the middle distance with the expression of someone running a very long calculation and not enjoying the result. Cale picked up my case. We walked back to the left tier. We did not hurry. In the corridor outside the chamber, Cale waited until we had rounded the first turn before he allowed himself one long, quiet exhale through his nose. He was professional enough to keep it to that. We collected our coats. We took the stairs down. The Commission sent a courier to our mission address 12 days later. The letter from the office of the presiding arbiter ran to 4 pages and covered, in careful institutional language, the Commission's determination that the navigational compliance framework for the Outer Vareth corridor would require comprehensive review pending clarification of the jurisdiction question raised at the previous plenary session. It noted that the human delegation's transit records for the corridor had been transferred to a status of administrative hold pending that review. It did not use the word apology. Page 3, paragraph 2, contained a sentence that took me 2 readings to understand was what it was. It said that the Commission wished to acknowledge that the incident finding of 3 years prior had been generated under a compliance framework whose jurisdictional basis was currently under review, and that in light of this, the Commission considered the matter closed with respect to the human delegation. I read that sentence a 3rd time. 41 years. Page 47. The archivist's log, sitting undisturbed in the founding session minutes of a body that had spent 4 decades building regulations on top of a foundation its own first presiding officer had quietly removed before the cement dried. The apology that went into the permanent record was not mine. I filed the courier letter in the mission archive, under closed matters, and went to find Cale. We had a full calendar of the Commission's other open items, and the day was not getting any shorter.